And this really is exactly what we're here today to talk about. It's how to build successful, healthy, responsible, and sustainable space economies. I suppose just a little bit in terms of the concept of space economy, and of course, it is intentionally an open concept. But I think what's suffice to say is that many countries, when they conduct space activities, at the center is a publicly funded agency or entity. But this is far from the end of the story. I mean, most sectors can point to private stakeholders also contributing to space activities. And then when you look at the ecosystem more generally, it quickly expands to include universities, financial institutions, the media, the general public, all playing their part in supporting the growth of a responsible and sustainable and healthy space economy. So yeah, in a nutshell, space economy really is a two-way street. It's looking at how the core space sector can help this wider picture, this wider socio-economic picture, and then also looking at how that kind of bigger picture can support the growth of the space economy itself. So it's really looking at both directions. So it's a complex topic, and today we're going to start unpacking that complex topic with a range of fantastic speakers. We've organized them into two groups, so 6 speakers in total. First group will be 3, looking at the very general concept of space economy. We'll then shift into a small moderated discussion, and then we'll move on to group 2, where we'll start the shift into kind of a more practical look at space economies in action. I should say here, yeah, I mean, thank you very much for everyone who submitted their questions on registration. We've had a huge number of questions already come in, and they've been handed to the speakers last week, so they're already kind of in the minds of the speakers before they deliver their remarks. And feel free to use the chat live function during the session, and I'll be monitoring that and incorporating those questions. If you have a specific question for one of the speakers, feel free to name them when you type your question, or if it's a general question, feel free to go down that route as well. Yeah, so this really is kind of an open session, it's a kickoff session. We're trying to stick on the practical side of building successful space economies and looking at what's happening today in the present, and how the experiences and the insights of our experts can be emulated into your own respective national context. So we're not really looking for kind of a hypothetical or policy discussion today. There's lots of other fora for that. But yeah, so practical focus on what works today is really what we're looking for. And this kickoff session really is hopefully going to be the start of a series of sessions where we look at topic-specific areas of a healthy space economy. So yeah, it's going to be quite general. So before I hand over to Director DePipo, let me just remind everybody, please keep your microphones on mute and cameras off. I'm gonna turn off my camera right now. We are recording the session, and the session will be uploaded onto the UNOOSA website. We also have colleagues who are taking notes, and hopefully we're going to try and capture some of the best practices and success stories being shared today into a report that we're also going to follow up with. So stay tuned for that as well. So at that note, it's my absolute honor to give the floor to Director DePipo for a few opening remarks at the start of this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Director.
Thank you, Ian. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome all of you to this first Space Economy webinar. This is a new undertaking for the Office for Outer Space Affairs that builds on our already existing activities across the policy, legal, and technical work. Well, space activities are difficult, expensive, and risky to undertake. For decades, this meant that they tended to be carried out only by governments with limited support from other stakeholders. The evolution and development of the global space sector, especially in the last decade, has led to a different story. We know that the pendulum is now swinging strongly towards a multi-stakeholder ecosystem of public and private players who are collectively contributing to the space economy. We have seen a rapidly growing interest of countries to invest political, financial, and human capital into space activities, private endeavors gaining a stronger momentum, and academia and civil society also expanding their role. The global space economy has grown significantly since 2008. Public and private investors have been funding space startups at an increasing rate. For example, more than half of the small satellites launched since 2012 were non-governmental, and more stakeholders than ever are developing their own space hardware. To express the same concept with different words, allow me to say that we are fully convinced that the success of a responsible, sustainable, and healthy global space economy rests firmly on a cooperative multi-stakeholder approach between state entities, private sector, non-governmental entities, and national and international policymakers and regulators. The prosperity of the industry is in the best interest of all stakeholders, as space operations benefit the society at large, far beyond the immediate returns in space economy. While globally, space industry is valued at around $450 billion, studies show that space is making huge economic contributions to other sectors, in addition to the space sector itself. Well, indeed, from finance to agriculture, space technology is supporting socio-economic development across the board. This is perhaps even more evident if we look at the research we have conducted in collaboration with GSA, the European GNSS Service Agency, which illustrates that almost 40% of the targets underpinning the 17 Sustainable Development Goals benefit from the use of Earth observation and geolocation satellite systems. That is a clear indication of how important is an healthy, dynamic space sector can be for accelerating sustainable development. It is in this complex ecosystem of stakeholders and links between sectors that the concept of a space economy is captured. Identifying the key building blocks that are needed to get this ecosystem blooming is exactly what we aim to achieve with this webinar and the series we want to build on the basis of today's experience. Indeed, with the expansion of the space sector as well as greater integration of satellites with other frontier technologies, it could be very well that in the future, these reports will be, these figures in these reports will even be higher. And what about benefits that cannot be so well quantified in economic terms? Identifying affected areas, disease modeling, telehealth, satellite communication, and contact tracing. This is but a short list of topics which highlight how society has made use of space to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. And let me add, food, water and waste management, efficient supply chains and transportation, tourism, emission reduction, financial services, e-commerce, or simply being online. These are all areas instrumental for a better future. Space-based data and infrastructure represent critical tools in the response to the current situation and in the path towards achieving global pledges by 2030, we need to build back better, moving away from practices and activities harmful to human health, biodiversity, environment, and the planet. It is therefore in the best interest of all stakeholders that we all together strive to ensure that satellites can be utilized to their maximum potential globally. Successful space economies are therefore of great importance, and I would like to commend your contribution to all the work that has been done in bridging the space divide already. We have a great range of space economy experts for today's kickoff session, drawn from the public and the private space sector. Thank you to each of you for sharing your insights and experiences, and this is very much appreciated. Thank you also to all the participants for joining us today. I'm sure that this will be a useful session, and we will be hearing some of these space economy success stories. Such occasions are crucial as we continue to work towards bringing the benefit of space to everyone, everywhere. While much remains to be done, dreaming big, supporting each other, and nurturing partnerships is the way forward. Space economy is not a slogan, is a reality, in particular in this post-pandemic phase. Thank you very much and enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, to people for those opening remarks. I mean, we couldn't have said it any better. It's that ecosystem of stakeholders. It's identifying those links and then ultimately painting down those building blocks of what really makes a healthy space economy and how to get a space economy driving that we hope that we'll start to unpack in today's session. So I'm just going to quickly share the agenda for today. As you can see, we're moving straight into the first panel discussion, where we'll call on Mr. Nasser Al-Rashidi from the UAE Space Agency first, then Professor Andrea Somariva from the St. Bocconi School of Management in Milan, Italy, and then Ms. Nathalie Ricard here from UNOOSA from our Space Applications section. 7 minutes for each of the experts, and then, as I say, we following it up with a Q&A and a discussion. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Mr. Al-Rashidi from the UAE Space Agency for a few words from their side about what's going on in the UAE with regards to building a healthy space economy. So, Mr. Al-Rashidi, over to you, please. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ian. And I would like to echo what you mentioned. I think the words and the statement made by Her Excellency Dr. De Pipo was to the point and really reflect reality as well as the future look of what we anticipate to the space sector as well as the space economy. Let me start by first, I think some people hear the word space sector, others they hear the word space economy, and others hear the word space industry, and some maybe are questioning, especially who are probably new into this, terms, and if there's a difference. For sure, the bigger umbrella is the word space economy, because it's not only specifically on tech industries, but it covers all the different industries that actually has a link to the space. And in that case, for example, consultancy, insurance, training institutes, all the institutes, all the entities that actually contribute to the space economy becomes part of that space economy. So really, it's the right and the wider term that encompass all the different stakeholders dealing with this field. The one under will be the space industry, which are specialized specifically on areas related to space. And then, of course, you hear later on things like the space sector, which is also a term that is used for different entities that are part of a particular clear fields and value chain fields on the space in the space sector. So these are terms that we use, and of course the word space economy would be the wider one, and it is the right one that is used by a number of entities, especially those who are in the governance level and in the economic level. And you will, if you look at, for example, the OECD reports that talks about the economic index related to space, they would use the word space economy that takes into account all these different things. Now, I would like to reiterate something that Her Excellency Dr. De Pipo mentioned. We look at the term sustainability. I mean, one of the things, of course, that I look after as the Director of Space Policy and Regulation is to develop policies and strategy. And we have also established an education program related to space law and education here, space law and space policy. And I remember one of the students, he asked me and he says, Nasser, I've seen the strategy, it's very interesting, but if you can summarize it for me in a very simple term. I was like, okay, so if you look at the vision, it should be there. And it's like, no, can you summarize the policy for me in one word? I was like, that's a tough one. If you give me two, I can. He says, you have 2 words. So I said, okay, the summary of the strategy, the National Space Strategy 2030 of the UAE is, if I'm going to mention it in 2 words, is sustainability. The real goal, the heart of everything that we do in that strategy is the word sustainability. And the other key term is partnerships. Those 2 terms is that what could actually be the way to sustainability is our vision, and partnership is the way to actually make this happen. And now sustainability is divided into 3 dimensions as we look at it. One is sustainability of Earth. And this is what a lot of you probably are familiar with, which is when we talk about, for example, SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, with the 17 areas and so on. So whether it's, climate, whether it's related to, disaster management and so on. And the second one is sustainability of space. And in there, we're talking about the space environment itself and the challenges that are in there, and the sustainability, whether, for example, overcoming debris challenges, frequency challenges, space traffic management challenges, space weather challenges. This is a whole other dimension of the word sustainability. Last but not least is the third dimension, which is actually related to sustainability of the space program itself, which is in here, the space economy itself, and how we can ensure that this economy continue to grow as well as maximize its benefits. With this, I would like to share with you a few slides that try to summarize the UAE approach when it comes to space economy.
Nasser, thanks a lot. Could I just hit pause there just to remind the colleagues who's just joined in? I think it's Dr. Naramandat from Mongolia. Would you mind if you just take your camera off, sir? Only because we're just having the cameras for the speakers. So for all participants, could they please put the camera off if possible? Okay, maybe not. Maybe we're on mute in Ulaanbaatar. That's okay. Sorry, Nasser, I'll give it over to you so we can keep going. But could I just remind one time for the participants to please put their cameras off. Thank you very much. Nasser, back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Ian. And I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, clear. So this is a summary of how we are looking at it here in the UAE when we talk about sustainable space economy. So quick overview, this is the UAE space sector today. So we have, a space agency, we have 3 key operators, but actually today we're talking about 52 entities working on the space economy. We have space strategy, space policy, and we are also developing a number of regulations. We have a UAE astronaut program. We have an ambitious exploration missions. Inshallah, in July this year, we're going to celebrate the launch of our Hope probe, which is basically a probe going to Mars. And we investing on the space projects over 22 million dirham, which is about $6 billion. We have over 3,100 people working in there. We have 10 satellites in the orbit. 8 are actually being developed and into the final stages. Today we have 3 universities that are offering 5 space education program, 5 certificates at university level as well as higher education, and we have 5 specialized R&D centers in space. The National Space Strategy that I talked about earlier is actually has a clear vision for the UAE between now and 2030. We would like to be one of the most pioneering and advanced countries in the field of space. Under this strategy, we have 6 clear goals for us. The first 3, we call them space focus, and the last 3, we call them enablers. So number 1 is to have a competitive and a leading space applications and services. Number 2 is to have an advanced R&D and manufacturing capabilities, as well as to have inspiring space scientific and exploration missions. The last 3 goals are more to how we're going to enable that. As mentioned, for sure, fostering the space culture and expertise. So we're no more talking about awareness, but rather talking about culture. It becomes part of the Emirati culture, as well as we're not talking about just building capacity, but rather experts in the field. effective local and international partnerships as well as investments are definitely an important vehicle for the sustainability of this program. And of course, adapting and enabling frameworks as well as infrastructure to, provide the needed or the requirements for the space sector to grow and to be able to provide their services. We have, as mentioned, 6 goals, 71 initiatives, and 18 programs under this Space 2030 strategy. Talking about, the space investment. This is coming from an international report that is actually looking after, the trends on the space investments. The report shows us clearly that, there are 534 venture capitals that has invested in space since 2009. 114 of them, which is almost, you could almost say 25% of them, were for the first time in 2018. So that shows a big interest, a big jump in interest by venture capitals into space companies in 1 year. And you can see there are more than 700 deals that at least announced and clear and available on the news. And you can see that 47 coming from venture capitals, 24% coming from angel investors, and private equity is 6%, and then corporation is about 19%. So there is it shows a clear interest. And also, if you look at the map below, you can see how the investment on space is across the globe. Of course, there are countries that with more intense into that investment, but you can see other growing countries who have more interest, whether at an angel or at a venture capital or even at a higher level or advanced level of these companies, space companies being invested in. You can see the number of companies, about 412 companies have been invested in between 2009 and 2018, over 18 billion just from private investments on the space companies. There is a growth of 32% on the seed and venture investment between 2016 and between 2016 and 2018. You can see the change of 32%. And at the same time, also, you can see total investment in general, there is an increase along with, if we're talking about also finance, then we're talking about 26% in terms of the total investment on these ones. So, I mean, numbers speak, but it's very clear that there is a clear interest from, private sector, private investments at a different level of the space companies, whether they are, just an entrepreneur looking for a pre-seed or a seed, or an advanced company that is actually looking for acquirement or extra investments for its next rounds. In terms of the UAE space policy impact, as mentioned, in 2016, we issued our national space policy, and it was very important for us 2 years later to start seeing what is the impact of what's been actually the impact of publishing this national space policy and rolling the program. We have seen, clearly that there is a big interest from the private sector onto the space economy. Almost 84% of the, expenditure on the space economy in the UAE is from the private. We've seen just in 2018 a registration of 24 patents, 64 scientific publications. We have over 50 entities working on the space economy here in the UAE, almost 3,100 people working on the space economy in the UAE, 17 sectors being served by our space product, whether it's a space application or space technology or space data or space telecommunications and so on. We are contracted by over 1,236 entities that are regular contracted with our services. 756 of them are outside the UAE. So kind of like a summary of where we are. So then how can we sustain that program? So we've talked about, the different levels, but one part that we wanted to, clarify is how can we sustain the program itself? And we come up with what we call the Space Investment Promotion Plan. Simply, it has 2 pillars. How can we have an attractive environment? And second, how could we create an investment vehicle, to support the space entities? On an attractive environment, for sure, we need to raise awareness, but it's not here awareness for the public. It's rather awareness for investors who need to know the opportunities, as well as awareness for the space industry to understand where are the challenges where they can contribute. The second thing is that to have an attractive regulatory framework and a one-stop shop for licensing regime, and encourage economic zones related to space with more incentives. In terms of vehicles, we categorized our different companies. There could be an advanced company where we just facilitate, or they are a company at a very early stage, an entrepreneur where we incubate, or someone already with a prototype and ready to go to the next step, then we just accelerate. So all this different categories we have prepared a program for. This is in a very high level how the model is. I'm trying to skip just because of the sake of time.
You got it.
But it's just basically we're trying to facilitate between the different levels of a company and how we can link between the different between the entrepreneur or the company looking for an investment, as well as the different levels of investors based on their interest. Putting the frameworks in place. So we have, as we mentioned earlier, we have the laws, the strategy, and so on, but also we have adjacent laws that are very important for us, like IP protection law, export and import law, as well as SME laws for small medium size, and other laws that basically incentivize foreign investment, as well as ownership of foreign background. These are economic zones. The ones in blue are already established that are basically have an economic zones for space. So we have Masdar City, where the space agency is located at. We have ADGM, as well as MBR Aerospace Hub. These are economic zones today that are welcoming space companies and also foreign companies to be open ad with a lot of incentives. These are different investors as well as potential grants providers. We have Tawazun, we have Mubadala, Gadan 21 programs, we have Dubai Future. These are all different programs that are actually with interest to support space program, as well as space entrepreneurship, as well as companies in space. We have run a test pilot for an incubation program back in 2019. We graduated 2 startups from that program. The total startups, space startups established in the UAE in 2019 were 7, and therefore we actually moved to something what we call the UAE New Space Innovation Program. This we launched in November 2019, and we're going to graduate 4 startups this year from that program in space. We have identified the areas where we have received 151 applications. We reached out to 44,000 entrepreneurs around the world. We have a very, let me say, very clear and very specific criteria to evaluate. 151 applications actually were able to be, validated and make it to the next level. Then we have finally announced the 8 winning teams, and we're going to prepare them for graduation of 4 startups in the end. These are the different stakeholders. So we talk to space industry to help us with this program, but also clients and non-space stakeholders. We talk to government, universities, as well as the commercial. This is an acceleration program that we also run in 2019. We graduated 2 startups as well from this program. These were more advanced. This is not an incubation, but rather an accelerator. And the 2 companies were graduated from there: Precious Payload, which is an online service to manage your whole satellite projects, as well as an EarthX, which is a way to visualize the space data in a very attractive and friendly way. The space law that I've talked about earlier, it enables, also, private as well as entrepreneur and innovation space. We are enabling, services that can be related to space debris or suborbital space tourism, space resources, as well as things related to launching from space, as well as logistical services in space. So these are things that are covered in our national space law that was issued in December 2019. Last slide I have in here is that we have established the Arab Space Cooperation Group. Today, I think the numbers probably more than 11. Last number I heard was 14 members today from the group. And what I'm trying to, and there is also a regional project here that we're working on, which is 813 project. This is a hyperspectral project. And what we're trying to highlight in here is that, yes, there is a collaboration here also from, education and from capability building as well as missions, but also in the end, we're opening markets, between the UAE and other Arab worlds and vice versa. So this is, in summary, how we are approaching our sustainable space economy in the UAE. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Nasser. I mean, you basically covered the entire webinar series right there in one presentation. That's absolutely fantastic. I mean, and that's exactly what we're looking for in terms of the pure breadth of what you need to do, as you say, with terms of linkages and partnerships amongst different stakeholders to get a space sector really up and running. And it's great to see so much activity going on in the UAE, and we certainly look forward to continuing that conversation. I see one comment in the chat requesting for the presentations to be shared, and for sure, with the agreement of all of the speakers, we will be doing that on our website going forward. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Our next speaker, Mr. Andrea Sommerviva, is from the professor, from FT Bocconi in Milan. And obviously, universities and the Royal Universities in this is huge. And so we're really looking forward to some introductory remarks from you. So, Professor, I'll give you the floor. And sorry, just before, could I just ask everybody to please turn off their cameras beside the speaker? So that would we just have one camera, hopefully, with Mr. Professor Sommerviva. Sorry, just one more request for everyone to turn off their cameras. Thank you so much. Okay, well, we'll keep pushing on, and hopefully people will get the message about turning the cameras off in due course. So, Andrea, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much for your introduction. And for the purpose of my presentation today, I use the definition of the space economy, as mentioned also by the previous speaker, from the OECD. The OECD defines the space economy as the full range of activities and use of resources that create and provide value and benefits to human beings in the course of exploring, managing, and utilizing space. So this is a very broad definition of the space economy. Now, as an economist, when I started to analyze the space economy, I started from two pillars of modern economic science. The first one is that a nation reach a higher living standard by becoming more productive. And the most important source of productivity gains stem from increasing knowledge and the technical innovation ensuing from this increasing knowledge. The second pillar is that technology can advance if it can rest on a set of institutions involved in the discovery, definition, and communication of scientific knowledge. Now, to describe this very complex system, I would like to share the following slide. Which we develop at the SDA Bocconi in our research lab, which is called the Space Economy Evolution Lab. Now, the basic model is composed of 3 blocks. One is knowledge sharing architecture, and the second one is the direct benefits which result from these activities or in economic terms, and then the indirect impacts in terms of environmental gains. Now, the first part, which we call knowledge sharing. Now, knowledge sharing is a concept very well known in economic literature, but usually applied at the company level. How to integrate the knowledge within the company to increase the productivity and capabilities of the operation of the company. Now, we extended this concept to a much broader concept which includes the governments, academia, and industry, and the financial community. And you can see this from the second flow chart, the knowledge sharing architecture. which include the different phases. The one is concerning with basic research and development of young scientific talents. The second one involves the idea that invention has to be brought to the market. So it's the complex relationship between industry and university in order to identify the potential market applicability of an invention, of a patent. And the third one is the setting up of companies, space startup with marketable products and services. And here is where the financial community contributes the most through initial phase, the intervention of venture capital fund, space angels, and so on. And in the second phase, during the development of the startup, which will become a fully functional company, then you have the intervention of a private equity fund, a private investor, and so on. Now, the old result of these activities result in a new application or application derived from past innovation to sector which are not space sector. Now, here in this picture, on the basic model, I highlighted several sectors which can benefit from application of satellite services. Agriculture, energy, transport, logistics, banking, insurance, and so on. Now, at the SEA Lab here at the SDA Bocconi, we are currently carrying out a research study on the impact of satellite services on this different type of sector. And we analyze from the two point of view of efficiency of the operation of the company and possible environmental benefit resulting from this operation. Now, the sector where we are most advanced in our analysis is agriculture. And I would like a little bit to explain how do we work. First of all, we work at the micro level in the sense that our study is based on a case study of specific companies which have applied successfully satellite application to their operation. Now, the result of this in this successful company are twofold. One, we have seen an increase in efficiency of the operation of these agricultural companies through, for example, an optimal use of fertilizer and pesticide, and the increase in the quality of the products. This is an important aspect in terms of efficiency and so economic growth. The second aspect is that satellite applications have indirect impacts on the environment in terms of, for example, saving water during the irrigation period, less soil and underground water pollution, and in certain cases, some reduction in CO2 emission. So, in this sense, satellite services are important for the transition to a sustainable development, because sustainable development is clearly one of the major challenges that we face in the 21st century. Now, we will extend next year the analysis to transportation and logistics, which is another very important sector, both in terms of roads, rail, and sea lane, energy, and banking and insurance. And try to understand what are the economic and environmental benefit of the application of this in the different sectors, and most importantly, try to understand what are the conditions that made the successful use of space technologies, satellite technologies on the different sectors, so that we can extend the analysis later on in order to see how this can be replicated overall in the economy. Now, having said this and having highlighted the central role of science and technology in fostering the transition of sustainable development, I have to remark that these are only part of what drive these processes, because this dynamic adjustment involves not only advancement in science and modification in technology, but involves also changes in organization, policy reform, and introduction of new rules of behavior. In summary, national and international space governance, so law, policy, and institution, are an important part of the environment that create a sustainable space economy and especially shape the evolution of private sector activities in space. And I would like to end up here my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Again, a wonderful overview of the concept itself and the really important role that universities have, and not just to support innovation, but also to measure, analyze, and explain how the impact of a growing space economy can affect other sectors. Your example there on agriculture is a perfect one. I couldn't think of a better one for indicating the socio-economic benefits of a strong space sector for those working immediately outside of space. So thank you, and I'm sure there'll be questions following up to you moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the last speaker for Group 1, Ms. Natalie from UNOOSA. So please, Natalie, over to you. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I think we're going to be sharing the slides. No, you don't have my slides?
Not yet. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, just coming forward. Maybe you could introduce yourself and a little bit about the work that you do whilst we're getting the slide.
So Natalie Rita, I work in the Office for Outer Space Affairs in the Space Application section. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the evolution and what has happened in terms of economic growth in satellite application during the last 20 years. So historically, the first space application and the main sector in terms of economic value is satellite telecommunication. Satellite TV were pointing at geostationary satellites, and these antennas have appeared on residential buildings in an increasing number of countries worldwide. Then over the years, more TV channels became available for broadcast, private satellite operators were created, and satellite grew bigger to broadcast ever more TV channels. Then the satellite industry started to look at provision of internet access to use satellite communication in areas that were not reached by terrestrial telecom networks. Technically, internet access needs a different technology from satellite TV, and if you want to avoid delay in transmission, you need satellite closer to Earth than the geostationary orbit. So you need a constellation with a large number of satellites in orbit, which is tremendously expensive to build. And in the early 2000s, we saw the first generation of satellite constellation with names like Teledesic, Skybridge, ICO, or Iridium, and they all failed. Mostly because the technology for user terminal antenna was not quite affordable at the time. Afterwards, there was no appetite from investors for new satellite projects, and the key actors remained the incumbent satellite operators for TV. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Possibly the main change from an economic perspective in the 2000s was the introduction of public-private partnerships. The pioneer was the Skynet 5 project in the UK with a model that then was replicated in several countries, and I'll talk about this later. That was also tried for the Galileo program. Then with smartphones and new applications such as social media, the demand for internet bandwidth continued to rise, and that included demand for bandwidth anywhere, anytime. So then in parallel, what we now call new space started, with several new private actors entering the space sector in the last 10 years. With the availability of funding, they developed technology for smaller satellites, for small launch vehicles that reduce the cost of launching a kilogram into orbit dramatically by a factor of 5 or 6. So it's about $3,000 per kilo today. And this created the condition for a new wave of satellite constellation. And we've seen about $3 billion spent during the last few years on those constellations. Now, these projects remain risky because the large capital investment that you require to launch the satellite and deploy the ground segment before you can serve your very first customer. Then, if you focus on areas where terrestrial telecom networks are not economically viable, then you're building your business case around customers with a low revenue, so it's also a challenge. As we've seen with OneWeb recently, the economic crisis caused by COVID-19 might have an impact on those projects, possibly also on the more traditional operators of geostationary satellite like Intelsat. But we can still expect that satellite communication will remain the main market in space application in the years to come, notably with hybrid infrastructure that combines terrestrial and SATCOM system, as we see in 5G, for instance. Then, next slide, please. If we move to satellite navigation, here we see that these are projects that started as government projects with GPS and GLONASS, and then other regions of the world starting developing their own constellation or their own regional system, either to become autonomous or to increase the performance of the GPS system on their own territory. Satellite navigation remained an economic model where governments fund the development and the operation on the space and ground segment. And the technical characteristics of the signal are made openly available, and then this enables the development of a downstream market with user receiver developed by private company. Technically speaking, it's the user receivers that combine the information from the satellite signals to calculate the user's location. And the receiver technical performance has improved year after year, and we see nowadays that they are integrated into many objects that we use daily. Now, from an economic perspective, there was a try for a public-private partnership with Europe's Galileo program several years ago. However, the investment to develop and operate the ground segment and the space segment is massive. It's in the order of several billions of euros. And ultimately, the industry concluded that it will not be a viable approach, and the project came back to be an institutional initiative. Now we have 4 core constellations available, plus several regional systems, plus augmentation systems. So the satellite navigation market has increased tremendously in recent years. And we see the development of services like the provision of high accuracy or provision of integrity, and a huge development of downstream application that will continue to increase the benefits from satellite navigation to society. Now, finally, if we move to Earth observation, next slide, please, we can see that the development has followed somehow a similar scheme to satellite communication. So historically, Earth observation was dominated by institutional programs with large, expensive satellites that requires years of development, and they were owned by governments or by space agencies. Then, with the development of new technology for smaller satellites, coupled with a strong demand for satellite imagery and lower cost of launches, it motivated a strong growth in the sector in the last 15 years. The sector remains driven by government demand, and we have seen several spacefaring nations launching their very first Earth observation satellites in the last 10 years. However, we've also seen private service providers who started to appear during that time. The downstream market for Earth observation follows the same evolution than the satellite communication. So it's moving from providing just the data to value-added services. There's a massive capacity increase in the number of service providers available and de facto price pressure. Here as well, we see that the economic growth is overwhelmingly in the downstream market to offer tailored services developed from satellite imagery. The satellites nowadays provide a tremendous amount of data that needs to be further processed. For instance, the Copernicus satellite provides 12 terabytes of data each day, every day. So in this context, the use of artificial intelligence in satellite imagery is going to be the latest trend in the market. Now, in the last few months, we've seen a growing demand for satellite imagery to assess the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the economy in real time. On the other hand, it remains to be seen whether the crisis will cause difficulty for the business case of new private operators or service providers. But overall, climate action will require Earth observation services, and the share of Earth observation in the space economy is bound to rise in the years to come. So that was a very, very short summary of the history and trends for satellite applications. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much from my side, Natalie, for, as you say, a very short but a very powerful overview of what this all means for the satellite industry itself. And as you very neatly summarized, it's a very big industry with lots of different elements to it that's changing, and it has changed a lot over time, and is going to be continuing to change going forward. So thank you very much for that. I'm keeping an eye on the time here, and I'm going to take the liberty as your moderator, actually, to just go straight into the next to go straight into the next slide, the next group. Sorry, here. So I'm just going to share with you the agenda for space economy and practice. I'm going to combine the two Q&A into one session, so everybody listening will have their opportunity to ask any questions that they want to the different presenters, and please do use the chat function to ask your questions. But as I say, I'm going to move straight into group 2 here, and we'll be starting with Mr. Chris Blackaby from Astroscale. Obviously a member of the private space sector there with a space company that's growing quickly, and hopefully Chris is going to talk us through a little bit about Astroscale's experiences and success stories for everybody here. So without further ado, Chris, I'll hand over the floor to you, please. Over to you. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely loud and clear. Over to you.
And see me all right?
Not yet. I can still see our colleague from Mongolia, but besides that, I can't see you yet.
Try to work on that. Hold on a second.
No problem. Take your time. I suppose just whilst we're waiting, just a quick reminder for everyone, for participants who are not speaking, please do turn off your cameras. Thanks a lot.
Trying to get the camera on there, having a little trouble there with everybody.
No problem. No problem. Take your time. I suppose I'll just use this time to remind all the participants, please do use the chat function to ask any questions to the presenters. Feel free. We've heard some great things from the UAE, from ST Abaconi, and here at UNOOSA about the various elements of this topic. There you go, Chris. I can see you crystal clear now. Okay, great. So I think, yeah, without further ado, we'll hand over to our first presentation for Group 2, where the aim will be shifting a little bit out of the theoretical, and moving towards kind of some practical examples of how this all works in practice. So, Chris, with that, over to you, please. Thanks. Okay, looks like we're just getting things set up on Chris's end. Just seeing if there's anything we can do on our side. Chris, how's it going there? Oh, there we go. He's back in.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Can you hear me
No
okay?
problem. We can hear you loud and clear. Absolutely fine.
Oh man, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry.
Hey, don't worry. Do you, if you want, Chris, we could move on to speaker number 2. How does that sound?
I'm okay. I'm okay to keep rolling if you guys are all right.
Oh yeah, no, we're fine. We're fine. We're eager to hear what you got to say.
Great. Well, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Oh, absolutely, crystal
Yes.
clear. There you go. Yep.
Perfect.
Rock and roll.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Sorry to delay everyone there a bit. I'm going to turn this on to presentation mode. So, as Ian mentioned, I'm here in Tokyo. I'm the COO of Astroscale Holdings, and Astroscale, as some of you may know, is a startup that is focused on sustainability of the orbital environment. And so what I'd like to do today, and I'll try to keep it efficient. I already think I used 2 minutes of my time in signing off and signing back on. So I'll try to keep efficient, and I'll give you a basic overview of Astroscale, the company, talk a little bit about what we do, and then I'll go through some, I guess it'd be like lessons learned from what we've done as a startup. I've been with the company about 3 years now. I came over from NASA. I was with NASA for about 14 years, including 5 years as the attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, and that's what brought me here to Japan. So a lot of experience on the government side, and then the last 3 years has been here in the startup side. So I'll give you a little bit of maybe a background about what we're learning as we grow. So let me start with just a background on the company. Let me see if that works here. Okay, I think you can see the first slide. So here, about Astroscale, we have now 5 locations around the world, about 125 people. And just in the past few years, we've grown significantly. We've grown from about 25, 30 people 3 years ago to now at 125. So it's been a significant period of growth. We've raised now about $140 million US, and the company has been around for about 7 years. We started in Singapore. That's where the founder, Nobu Okada, who's a Japanese national, he founded the company in Singapore, opened the Tokyo office a couple years later, and then an office in the UK after that. Last year, we expanded out to the US. It was kind of a risky move or an ambitious move. We're still small. We still aren't. We still haven't launched successfully anything yet. So we're still on a bit of an early stage. But we knew that this was a global business, and we had to have a global footprint. So we opened up an office in the U.S. So right now, our distribution of team members, we have about 70, 75 in Japan, a couple in Singapore. 30 in the UK, about 12 in the US. And the last thing you see on there is new news, which you may have seen. We acquired the assets of ESS, Effective Space, in Israel. So we're moving into that side as well. And the acquisition of the Effective Space assets actually opens up the markets that we're able to serve. We, as I said, are focused on sustainability and on-orbit servicing across all aspects of space. Our initial focus was on LEO. So end-of-life services, if you look at the far left of your screen, basically focused on commercial removal of satellites, preparing them for removal before they launch. The second one is ADR, active debris removal, bringing down current active debris. I won't go into the whole details of debris. I think most people have some familiarity with it, so I won't go deep into background on debris, but let's just say it's a problem. As was alluded to earlier from our speaker Nassar from the UAE, sustainability is an issue in space. So that was our first focus. We also are looking at in situ SSA, so monitoring of objects in space. And this acquisition of effective space moves us into life extension services in the GEO belt. So we're looking at LEO and GEO in terms of our service offerings globally. How do we focus on this? Really, there's three main aspects that we need to look at: develop the technology, identify the business case, and inform the policies. One of those alone will not be successful. We would say two of those probably will not be successful. You need all three. We need to develop that technology. We need to identify those customers that make a business case, and we need to talk to the policymakers, both international groups like UN and domestic groups, domestic governments in Japan, Europe, US, elsewhere. So that's basically what Astroscale does. So I could give whole presentations, of course, about Astroscale's background, but rather than that, considering the topic of this conversation on building a space economy, I wanted to talk about reflections from a space startup and go through a few of these. Now, there's a lot of words on this slide. I'm gonna fill them in point by point, but I just wanted to get them down for everybody to be able to see and understand more clearly. First, obviously, got to secure financing, most essential first step. And it's, of course, easier said than done. So basically everything that's going to come after this in terms of reflections leads into this idea of securing financing. So we have a great CEO who was able to raise money right off the bat. He started it on his own, and he's done incredibly in building up the company and the amount of runway we have. Typically 12 to 18 months runway, obviously 2 to 3 years is better, and looking for a creative approach, looking at a variety of different aspects, sponsorships, grants, investments, loans. Don't just be focused on one thing. Pursue an inspirational mission. There's a lot of competition out there for talent, and you need to attract the best engineers to build your technical solution, your best managers, PR, finance, all that support staff. You need to get them excited about things. And as a startup, you're not going to be able to pay them a whole lot of money. So you got to come in there with an inspirational mission. People want to work for a company with a purpose. And that's what we think we have. One of the questions in the initial questions, Ian, you sent around was, is public outreach an aspect of this? 100% yes. Have to actively engage in public outreach. People are still excited by space, but they don't recognize how it touches us every day. And Dr. DePipo talked about that in her opening remarks, how we're all touched by space every day, and even more so now in the midst of the pandemic. People have to understand how close it is. It seems far away, but it's right there impacting our lives. So crafting the messages and finding the platforms to actively convey information is essential. Connecting with government stakeholders. Space is not truly commercial market yet. Government support is essential for R&D and for initial missions. We all want to see a growing market for a space economy, but we need to rely on government investment and support right off the bat. And identify and highlight those priority areas where government investors and backers are going to want to engage. Develop an international presence. It can't be done in one country. Space is inherently global. Space policies and standards are global. The business is global. The customers, suppliers, partners, they have to be around the world. I started talking about what Astroscale is like. We touch a lot of places, and that was by design. We knew that we needed to have a voice in each country. We needed to have technical capability in each country, and that's benefited us. Articulate a clear business case. I think some startups maybe get too caught up in the excitement of the technology or thinking about a policy, and they think that, okay, we prove the technology and then it'll come. Then everything will come rolling in. we can't look at it that way. We've got to start from the beginning to craft this business case so that it's ready when the technology becomes mature enough to be used. So we've brought on a team of finance people and strategic business analysts and economists to look at this issue that we're looking at of space debris and to craft that business case. It's still tough. It's really hard, but we're preparing for it now. And finally, prioritize that management of the team. We have over 120 people globally across 5 different cultures now, countries, variety of different cultures. How do you maintain a holistic connection across the team, overall global standards, but allow for regional autonomy? And it's something that we think about all the time. And strong internal communication and connections with team members are absolutely essential. So that's something that tends to be forgotten sometimes too. Make sure you look down and in as well as up and out. So those are some things that we've tried to implement. I'll stop there, of course, take questions and always open for conversations afterwards. I know our time is limited here, so I think I'll stop there, Ian.
Hey, thanks a lot, Chris. And you're spot on the time. Thanks for the really succinct kind of look at what is clearly a long journey that Astroscale have been engaged on, and it's really those kind of experiences that you've got about how you've navigated those challenges and how you've gone step by step to the fantastic position that you're at the moment, and we're looking forward to continuing that conversation going forward with you and everyone at Astroscale. Okay, so moving on to the next speaker as we shift into this kind of a bit more practical focus group, and here we're going from Tokyo to Bangkok with our colleagues from GISTA. So I would like to hand over the floor to Dr. Niamwan to talk a little bit about how, from the public sector side, the space economy is going from strength to strength in Thailand. So with that, I would like to hand over the floor to you, Doctor, for your presentation. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damrit Niamwan from GISTA, Geoinformatics and Space Technology Development Agency. And as the moderator mentioned, we are government agency dealing with the space technology and how the space technology will be utilized for the public sector. One of our main target right now is to promote the space economy in Thailand and also in Southeast Asia. Yeah, make a presentation. Okay, I think most of the speakers mentioned a lot about telecommunication, Earth observation, navigation, and I think this is the industry that we focus in Thailand right now. But also based on the picture that we trying to investigate the size of the industry in Thailand, the real space industry is quite small, but the wider space industry is quite big. And according to the investigation, we have the quite small numbers in terms of the economic impact, around $1 billion, but also we have a lot of social impact to the public. As you can see from the slide, downstream industry and wider space economy is very big, and its impact to a lot of people in Thailand. You can see that the impact is not only the real, I mean, only the space industry sectors, but also telecommunications, navigation, as a lot of the moderator mentioned. To be specific to the session, you can see that we're trying to, in Thailand, for GISDA, we're trying to make some kind of the wider space industry more flexible. When we're trying to speak about space industry, we combine the aerospace into the picture also. And in this picture, we're trying to put all the participants, all the function of the ecosystem of the space industry together, and we call the aerospace industry ecosystem. We're trying to have the picture of the government and also the public sector in the same picture. We're trying to put the policy, standards, R&D, and international collaboration with the national infrastructure that we're trying to make the public sector to be utilized. And for the private sector, you can see that we focus based on the wider industry that I mentioned. We focus on number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is about manufacturing. And as you can see that we have before the COVID-19, we have a lot of activity according to aviation. But at the moment, we may have to revise our strategy according to the this situation. But number 2 is the service. And service based on Earth observation, global navigation system, and also we also focus in the very near future for the what we call new space, for the space science exploration. And this is something that we trying to promote to the private company. We're trying to make a lot of training to the startups and also our young generation in the universities. And I think based on this, Dr.
Niamanda, I think you just hit mute there. Just last 5 seconds.
Can you hear me?
Just go ahead. Yeah, hear you loud and clear. Thanks a lot.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't know what I lost, but I think that the point is at the current situation with the COVID-19, we're gonna focus on number 2 for the service and applications, and we have to work enhance with the private sectors and also with the public sectors like the universities for training of our people, standardization, and real business that we are focused on. A lot of opportunities in nowadays for geospatial big data that we're trying to build in our countries. And we also trying to map and connect with the Southeast Asia market like Indonesia and also the Laos, Burma. This is also another opportunities that we're trying to link on. And we at the moment we are open with the international company for discussion and business that we can implement together in Thailand and also Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thanks for that overview of the work that's going on, as you say, in Thailand and Southeast Asia. And I mean, as you say, it's really important. You've really drawn out the fact that not every country in the world has space exploration right at the top of the to-do list. The downstream applications, the services, how to get space-derived data involved and injected into the wider economy is obviously a huge part of what we're talking about. So thank you very much for bringing that to the focus today. Hopefully hearing more from you during the question and answer session. And one last speaker now before we go to that session. I'm going to turn to Mr. Luigi Scaterati from the PricewaterhouseCoopers, who is doing a lot of work over there in their Paris office, leading PwC's efforts to support countries and advise countries and work with countries as they look to build healthy, sustainable space economies. So Luigi, I'll hand the floor over to you, please. Over to you, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Just 1 second. I'm looking for the right presentation. I apologize, I can't seem to find the PowerPoint. One second. In the meantime, I'll maybe introduce myself. So I'm a partner and in PwC in France, and I've been. Oh, here it is. Got it. So can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yep. Perfect.
Sorry for the glitch. So just to introduce myself and give a little bit of context as to why PwC is present in this type of presentation. So I'm leading the space practice in PwC. That is a dedicated expert practice serving the space sector. And this is quite unique among large professional services firms. And it has also quite a long heritage dating back to the times of Booz & Company and Booz Allen Hamilton. So our space practice as a core strategy and policy team that is based in Paris. And our team has done multiple assignments with public and private entities in Europe and across the world, and it serves as a hub for the PwC network worldwide. So we coordinate a network of contact and satellite teams in other territories. So notably, we have been supporting the European Commission, the GSA, ESA, and other space agencies and institutions worldwide in economics, policy, strategy, and regulation. We are also active in capacity building. So we have a technical team based in Toulouse that is specialized in the development of innovative applications, particularly multi-intelligence applications based on the use of satellite data in order to promote the use of space data in non-space industries. So we have a number of reports and publications that are available on our website. For example, we recently did papers on the impacts of the COVID crisis on the space sector and how space is actually helping addressing the crisis. We have an overview of emerging space nations that will be expanded. We hope in cooperation also with UNOOSA. And so I encourage you to go to the website to find out more. So just to the specific topic of the space economy. I think a lot has been said already by the previous speakers, but just to set a little bit the stage for my discussion. So in the end, it has been mentioned, and it's important to stress out that space is a very, very peculiar sector because it is very diverse. So it encompasses a number of domains that are very specific. So access to space, satellite services, SSA, and space traffic management, and the in-orbit economy type of domains are quite different, and they have their own specificities and trends and challenges. All of this is heavily embedded into a wider scene of policy and regulation, because space is deeply embedded into the institutional scene, since it still vastly depends upon government spending and government initiatives and regulations. Space has a huge reach into other industrial sector because it's an enabler for many other applications and many other industries. As such, space is subjected by cross-cutting macro trends in the economy. So this is also important to say. And finally, space has very, very wide societal and economic impacts. So it's basically, I would say that it's the sum of all of these that somehow constitutes what we call space economy. I mean, there are many definitions, many have been brought forward by the previous speakers, but in the end, all of this somehow, in one way or another, is part of the space economy. When we look at why is it important to develop a space economy? So PwC has done a number of studies assessing the impacts of investing into the space sector, and we have evaluated that the societal and economic impacts of space are very, very vast and far-reaching. So the transactional impacts are significant. So we call transactional impacts the economic impacts that comes from investing into space assets, in building space assets. So we have found in our studies done on multiple space programs a trend of GDP multipliers that go from 1.4 to 2.0. This is very high compared to other industrial sectors. We have also significantly high employment multipliers, and also government revenues, tax revenues as a % of the cost spent in the programs. So all of this means that just by investing into building, for example, a satellite program or a space infrastructure, just by building it, we are creating economic benefits that go beyond the simple investment. Then enabled and catalytic impacts represent everything that is basically created or enabled by using the assets that we have built in space. So for example, exploiting a satellite program. Even here we have significant impacts in terms of sales multipliers, spillovers, and societal and environmental impacts. So this is without considering the stimulus to the European industry, the establishment of Europe as a leader in this particular sector, contribution to data independence, to innovation, to international cooperation, and to the European influence and soft power. So in the end, this is a picture for Europe, but it's we can definitely say that this is something that is more or less generalized, and investing in space really brings value to the wider space economy. Concerning new players and what it means for new players to approach the development of a space economy. First, we should say that recent trends in space have made it easier for new countries to get into the development of a space economy. So there is a general trend towards the democratization of space. So first, from let's say a wider governance perspective, we can say that space has moved. I mean, this has been said by previous speakers, but just to stress it again, we are moving from government-owned and led sectors towards sort of a government-funded but let's say privately driven sector somehow. So government involvement is still prevalent, but we don't have any more like governments in charge of technical developments of programs with an higher role of the private sector. We have been experiencing like a generalized reduction of the cost of access to space programs. So whereas before satellite programs and space programs in general required huge capital investments, right now, and therefore, I mean, they were sort of tied to countries with specific space heritage. Right now, it's easier to start with a small SAT program, and so even smaller countries can start developing space activities. And finally, and very importantly, there's been a democratization of access to space data. So right now, it's easier than ever to access satellite data and exploit it, create products and services. So it's very easier for countries that want to approach the space economy, for example, to focus on even on downstream applications and easily embed these applications into their wider economy. So what are the key items to create a space economy? So what we have seen by supporting our clients is that, I mean, it's clear that a country needs a very clear space strategy and long-term roadmap. So there needs to be priorities on what to focus on, because resources are not infinite. There is a need for a governance that is fit for purpose. Whereas before you always had like a space agency dealing with everything and or a space office, like being entirely mandated with everything that was space. Now there is a need to coordinate among different institutional actors in the economy in order to make sure that there is there are synergies, that space assets and activities are used in multiple other sectors and so on. There is a need of awareness and outreach, as previously mentioned by Chris. This is absolutely a key. And then to support actively capacity building and skill creation, because of course you can't do anything if you don't have the right skills in your specific country. Finally, there is a need to promote strong links between the government and the industry and the private sector. And we have seen a very notable example from Nasser when he has described their global space accelerator program in the UAE. So with this, I just wanted to conclude my presentation, and of course I'm available for any other additional questions or follow up, even offline.
Perfect, Luigi. Thank you so much. That's, yeah, I mean, what a fantastic overview of how you can break down such a complicated picture into practical, meaningful steps that can really build a framework for implementation and activities in this area. So really appreciate that. So that's the end of the second group, and that's the end of all of the remarks from our speakers. So I'm now very much going to be looking in the direction of the chat. We've had quite a few questions coming in, and I'm jotting those down as they do come and combining them with the more than 100 questions that were submitted by different participants during registration. And I'm actually going to turn to those questions now. So I would just ask our speakers to just get ready, because we've got a few questions coming in the direction of FD Abokoni, a couple of questions for our colleagues from UAE, from GISTA, Astroscale, absolutely everybody. I'd like to start perhaps with you, Professor Somariva, and any of us other speakers actually who are interested in taking this on. But basically, the work that you're doing to talk to other sectors, you mentioned agriculture and transport. Any impressions you can give about how easy it is to articulate the value of space to these what are effectively non-space sectors? And what are these non-space sectors perhaps most interested in, first and foremost, in understanding what space can do to support their areas of activities? So how does that conversation go when you start talking to these colleagues from outside of the space sector?
Thank you, Ian. And you know, that's an interesting question. I can reply because whenever I talk with, for example, companies like in agriculture or transport, there is a lot of interest about space services. But the most important question that they ask, what is the contribution of the space services to my balance sheet? So to the efficiency of the company, reduction of cost, increase of revenues, these are the basic questions that they ask. And that's the reason why we started with making case study of companies which have successfully employed already, whether they are in Italy or around the world, the use of satellite services, and try to understand what are the mechanisms in which these services affect the operation of the company. Because that's the key question, that there is a lot of interest outside. but there is a lot of concern about what is the impact on my balance sheet. I have to make an investment because you have to realize that if the company has to introduce, let's take an example, an agricultural company. If they have to introduce satellite service, what does it mean? It means Earth observation, it means navigation, it means meteorology. They haven't invested in some human capital within the company because you don't want to have these services and not be able to manage the result of these services in terms of the effect on the operation of the company. So there is an investment on one side, and they're interested to know what are the effects on their revenues and cost. I hope I replied to the question.
I mean, thank you. I mean, and that's really what it does all come down to. It's the balance sheet and it's articulating that message.
Yeah, and that's why as a university, as a business school, as soon as we terminate the analysis of one sector, for example, we're now working and closing to the end of agriculture, we will organize workshop seminars for companies in that particular sector to highlight what are the benefits, what are the conditions to successfully use these satellite services within the company in order for them to understand and eventually make a choice whether to use it or not.
Yeah, and then quantifying that impact through analysis is also crucial, I would imagine, to trying to put a bit of objectivity into what we're talking about. No, not easy, and we look forward to hearing more about that in the kind of topic-specific webinars that we've got coming up. So thank you very much for shining a light in that direction, Professor. Okay, I'm going to turn now to Chris in Astroscale because I see quite a few questions coming in from the chat in his direction. And I wanted to pick up on one of the points that he had in his slide, which was informing at the international level about the work that Astroscale is doing and how you make that connection between the international perspective and what's going on in Astroscale at the national level. So Chris, any thoughts or experiences that you got in that direction would be fantastic. So over to you, please, Chris.
Thanks, Ian. We are all impacted by the concern of space debris internationally equally. Everyone is reliant on making sure that we have a sustainable orbital environment. And so for that reason, it's an inherently international issue. And so this issue resonates for everybody. And so when we look internationally, the talking point is basically the same everywhere. You want to maintain services, you want to continue to understand climate monitoring and communication and everything that we get from data from satellites, well then we need to make sure that the orbit is sustainable. So the message resonates internationally. Now, basically all of our funding has been Japanese based. So it's an interesting mix between having to appeal to the domestic government in Japan that we are based in and that we've gotten all of our funding from Japanese investors, incredibly strong support from the Japanese government. It's been fantastic. So there's been that strong push from Japan. They've been really far-reaching in supporting this idea of sustainability of space, which has been good, which has been great, and then having to expand that now globally. And there is some challenge there because, as the professor just said, everything is based on the bottom line, on the cash flow statement, and so investors as well, they want to see a change. They invest in us because they recognize it's not a quick turnaround, that it's a long-term beneficial investment for society, but they're investors. They want to see a return. So we have to be able to show that out, which is why I showed the business case argument there make sure you focus on building up that business case. So to focus back on your question, Ian, it's a mix, and so we've got to address that local interest in Japan that's supported us so far from a policy and financial perspective, but spread that message out globally. And the message that we're spreading resonates globally. The issue of finding investors is a little tougher globally, but the message resonates.
Perfect, and I'm sure that message is resonating louder and clearer as we go, because at least what we see here at the UN, the global interest in space is not going anywhere other than upwards. So yeah, no, thanks for those comments, and thanks again for joining us today, Chris. I've got another question here, and this is looking back to Luigi at PwC. Because he had some really interesting comments about the work that PwC are doing there with regards to multipliers of GDP impact and also employment sectoral growth. So Luigi, I'd love it if you could potentially unpack a little bit more about that. I'm also going to give another heads up as well to our colleagues in GISTA, because I'm looking at some of the chat and some of the questions submitted on registration there. And it would be really good to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing to train the next generation and to try and generate that bedrock of public support for space affairs in Thailand and beyond. So I'm just going to see if Luigi is still online by any chance. I'm wondering if he is there. Okay, perfect. So please, Luigi, over to you. So GDP multipliers, how do you even start getting to quantifying something like that? And also the multipliers on the sectoral growth side. I mean, it'd be really interesting if you can give us some snapshots into your work in that area. Thanks.
Absolutely. So in the end, the thing with GDP multipliers is that what you need to do is model the way, let's say, the overall network of transaction works for the space sector when some funding is injected in the economy. So let's assume basically you, as a government, you decide to fund, I don't know, a program for $100 million, for example. In the end, what you will do is place some contracts with some industry primes, who then at their level, they will place some additional contracts to other suppliers, who will have some tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, then commodity suppliers, and so on. So there's going to be, let's say, there's going to be like a chain of spending further down the supply chain that will sort of create a beneficial economic stimulus. So this is in principle the reason that brings like a multiplier, because in the end this chain of spending is non-linear, and there is a multiplication of the value added created. So in the end, this is the very principle of an economic stimulus. So you know, when you want to basically recover an economy from a recession, you increase public spending. If you are the US, if you are Europe, you're going to further recession, but this is another matter. So in the end, the logic is that what you need to calculate, what you need to do to calculate the GDP impact of spending in space is model specifically the space supply chain. So this is a dedicated modeling that is required because space as a sector is not, let's say, tracked by statistical institutes. So space is in fact embedded in I think together with aerospace and defense, is embedded in transportation. So it's impossible to automatically model it. So there is a need for dedicated modeling exercises. And so this is what we do. So we model the supply chain specifically that is interested in a program. And with there we see how the spending propagates. We plug that into a wider model that basically then derives the GDP impact, the transactional impact just by the spending. So it's important to stress what it means by GDP impact. So we're talking about just the transactional impact. So not the economic benefits that you get when you actually use then the programs. So that's an additional and separate type of assessment. So this is the reason why the GDP impact multiplier is relatively small, between 1 and 2, rather than a very large, like the multiplier that you get when you consider the enabled economy, which can be 8, 10, and so on. I don't know if you want also me to take the question that I see in the chat.
Hold on one second, Luigi, and I certainly do. I just see that Mr. Somariva has his hand up, and I'm just wondering if he wants to also come in on that particular topic. Andrea, if you do, please feel free to take the microphone.
Okay, no, just
and then look, we'll jump back to you, Luigi,
comment,
on the
Ian. I think that the multiplier that we were talking about, or Luigi was talking about, is clearly a very good indicator of government spending. And there is a long tradition in economics in calculating the multiplier of government spending. But in my opinion, there is another interesting aspect which is much more difficult to assess at the macro level, is what is the effect of space services on the non-space sector, and how this affect the macroeconomic level the economy. That's a much more difficult question to approach, but I give you some highlight in which we are thinking to approach this type of things. Once we have completed the case studies, the analysis for the main sector, which I think are very important, like transportation, agriculture, and energy, we will try to make a scenario, if you want. And here there is a problem of aggregation of data. If we can extrapolate the single cases to the overall sector, it's an aggregation problem, and there is a lot of problem to solve that thing. But if we are successful, then we can apply the efficiency gain in the different sector using a sort of dynamic input-output analysis. So how, for example, agriculture, for example, take a country like Italy. Agriculture is a small component of the overall GDP, but agribusiness is a different story. So how efficiency in agriculture affect agribusiness and down all the chain, the value chain. This is a very difficult theoretical and economical problem to solve, but we think that we will approach that once we have completed the case studies and try to understand if we can aggregate the single case study, building a scenario for the whole sector, which is quite a difficult problem to solve.
That's it. But we're not here to do easy things, I suppose. So it's good that we've got a lot of friends and partnerships to count on as we try and work on this together. So yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much there, Professor. Okay, right. Well, I'm gonna jump back to the chat here, and as Luigi said, there was one comment coming straight to him. So I'll throw the floor back to him if he wants to pick that one up right now. It's a little bit theoretical, but I suppose as we're drawing to a close for today's webinar, I would be more than happy if he wants to answer that question, then please do. So Luigi, back over to you. And the question is, about the European context with regards to budget. So I suppose it's a public investment question first and foremost. And really asking about, quote unquote, is there enough public investment going in this direction to meet demand? And I think I probably already know what the answer to that is, but please, Luigi, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the question is about the next, the recent proposal for the budget for the next MFF, and if it's sufficient to face the current and future challenges in space. I mean, of course, we know that the proposed budget for the MFF is not what was proposed last year. but considering basically the current climate, considering the Brexit situation, in the end, the new proposal, I would say it's to be seen in a positive light. So I think it's not bad at all, and I hope it actually gets approved. It's of course it's 1 billion short of the initial original proposal that was done last year, but in the end, the cuts that were sort of projected were supposed to be even higher. So in the end, just 1 billion cut is not that bad. It's more than enough I think it's enough to push forward the EU flagship programs. It's still a significant increase over the previous MFF. It remains to be seen what happens to other additional initiatives like EU GovSatcom and space traffic management initiatives and so on. But overall, I would say it's not that bad, and I sincerely hope it gets approved.
Thank you very much. Great. I mean, yeah, as I say, the public investment at the start, getting some of these things up and running, shifting that through the public-private investment and then onwards and upwards is obviously a big part of the global puzzle in this regard. I'm just going to pick up on one of the earlier questions, which goes all the way back to our first speaker, Mr. Nasser Al-Rashidi from the UAE Space Agency. And that was a request if you could just unpack a little bit more about the Mars City and the human habitation technologies that and that area of economic activity which UAE is supporting. So Nasser, are you still online there? And if you are, it would be great to hear a little bit more about the work that's going on in the UAE in this thing. I'm just seeing, oh, it doesn't look like, okay, not a problem. I mean, certainly, I think the time frame for that Mars City should be in the, if I recall rightly, some of the details on the slides in the next couple of years. And for sure, Mr. Al-Rashidi will be available for direct follow-up.
Thank you, Ian. And just to,
there you are.
On this particular point, sorry, there is a little bit of problem with the connection, but to make it short, we're expecting, inshallah, in the next 3 to 4 years to see this actually being realized, inshallah, in the UAE. Work has already commenced. We are also improved the location for that city due to also link with other initiatives related to space and promoting space. And of course, the objective is clear, is that we're trying to mirror the environment of Mars here and do all the R&D and tests to as much as possible similar environment, which will increase, of course, the appetite to R&D related to space and space exploration in general in Mars, but also be a hub for all, let me say, researchers and scientists, especially those who are interested in planetary science, and yes, and do a lot of forums and also engage with the public to come and visit this, this city, which is actually the largest in the world of such kind.
Perfect. Yeah, exciting stuff indeed, and thanks for that follow-up, and thanks for being with us again here today. Okay, colleagues, we've run over a little bit from time, so thank you very much for your patience and your perseverance. It's great to see so many of you still tuning in. I think I'm going to put a close on it there, so to allow everybody to get on with the rest of their Mondays. So I think the only thing left for me to say now is that the recording of this session will be available online on our website to playback at your leisure. We've also sought agreement from the speakers to make their presentations available also on UNOOSA.com on the Space Economy Initiative webpage. I think as we look forward going into the series of webinars which we are planning to produce, we've seen quite a lot of topics that the different speakers have touched upon today. I mean, like, without going into too much of the details, we've seen the importance of making the case for space, building that bedrock of public support. We've also seen the importance of measuring the impact of space and trying to quantify how the space sector can reinforce different economic activities out of the immediate core work of the space industry. We've also seen the importance of the international level and how we can connect what's going on internationally with what's going on domestically. We've seen the role of the universities, the role of finance, the role, as I already said, of other sectors and how they can support and both contribute to a healthy and growing space economy. And likewise, we've heard comments about the building back process and how countries looking forward into the next 3, 5, 10 years can incorporate space into the work that they are doing. A lot of great questions in the chat, and as I say, a lot of great questions coming in during the registration process, trying to work out exactly the main challenges and the main bumps in the road that all of these different people have experienced in the work that they're doing in their own contexts to build healthy space economic activities. Moving forward, the next plan from our side is definitely to take each of these topics one by one and do similar webinars going forward, where we're going to gather a similar geographical range of expertise to unpack these particular building blocks one by one, with a view of putting together really a blueprint of all of the different elements that a country just starting out or wanting to take their space economic activities to the next level need to keep in mind. And I think that goes in the direction of Edward's question in the chat in terms of what's the longer term plan for the work that we're doing here. So please feel free to keep in touch and stay tuned as we continue to kind of unpack this work going forward. One quick mention about the future panels. We're definitely looking for more speakers. Obviously, as you can see from today, we've got some gender balance between female and male participants, but this is something we will definitely be approaching and working on going forward. So female speakers from the global space sector, please do get in touch, and we'll be reaching out to you as well for those future sessions, rest assured. So I think at this point, it's there's nothing left for me to say other than say thank you, and please do keep tuning in and looking out for updates on our website and also updates on social media. It's just been a great discussion today. We've tried to tackle a huge range of topics and a very complex issue. But as we've seen from the great questions and the number of participants today, there's a lot of interest out there from around the world to really get going on building dynamic, healthy space economies that are accelerating socio-economic development for the benefit of all. And that's exactly what we're trying to do and we'll be looking to do going forward. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you for the whole of the UNOOSA team for making this happen, and looking forward to keeping in touch.